Hey y'all, it's time to build for the African buffalo today. This is technically number 3 out of about 130 animals, which means we're about 2% through. Yay. I would also like to thank each and every single one of you that decided to click on this video. It really makes me happy to know that you decided to watch this video out of the hundreds that are on here, especially about the African buffalo builds. For the African buffalo, I decided to only do the buffalo, although in the long run it would be amazing to have an enclosure that knocks out a few more animals. To me, it seems like a bad idea to include something that can be fairly territorial, especially around young, with other species. So, in my opinion, in order to keep it realistic, I decided to take the L and keep it a one-species habitat. I also somewhat enjoyed adding a few facts about the addax in my last video, so I think I'll do it again. Much like the addax, the African buffalo is in the family Bovidae. They inhabit large plains and typically herd in large groups that can reach into the thousands but are more likely to herd in the hundreds. They weigh around 1,200 pounds on average with a lifespan of about 11 to 22 years. The main threats to their survival include hunting as well as land loss due to farming, much like the addax in the last video. Now that they've been somewhat introduced, let's get right into the build. I started with building this sort of barn shelter for the buffalo since they reminded me a lot of cows. I started with trying to figure out the roofing situation and went with sort of a dull thatch look. Deciding that the roof didn't have quite as much texture as I would have liked, I added some conservation slats. Again, I use them a lot. I really love the mud walls, and since I don't usually get a chance to use them as much as I would like, I went with these cool little circular tower things in the mud wall structure. For the small mud tower, I felt like I needed another thatch roof with the same shape in order to tie things together. I ended up slightly slanting the roof, adding to a more organic and slightly roughened texture to the build, implying that there could be some sort of weathering, I suppose. I added more conservation slats in order to create a barrier where the roof meets the mud, and made a lighter colored floor out of the plaster in order to tie the whole space together and separate it just slightly from the surrounding environment. Next, I made the guest viewing point. Much like with the aardvark and meerkat enclosure, I made a circular viewing spot with some 4-meter paths and built a small circular shelter spot for the guests to view comfortably in pretty much any weather. I decided to dig a fairly deep trench and blended it into the landscape, sloping it up towards the barn. I made this in order to add some texture to the overall design as well as provide a slightly better viewing angle for the guests. Afterwards, I once again worked with the mud walls by Caesar Creates in order to blend in the rougher edges from the walls made by the trench. I also decided to add in some rocks and blend in the mud walls to provide a sort of stopping point for the fencing. For the fencing, I once again found an interesting looking fence from the buildings menu and added a conservation slab. I continued this design starting from the barn so that I could blend it into the area easier. Although this area is once again more square than I would have liked, I feel like the space provided a good grazing area for the buffalo. Moving on to planting, I decided to try and take it easy. Although I feel like I've once again added way too much grass, I tried not to pay too much attention to where I put shrubs and bushes in hopes that it would make it feel more organic and less manicured. Overall, this enclosure took about 5 hours to build, although I feel like I could improve in some places, namely the half-decent guest pathing and planting job. I really enjoyed how the barn came out. Something about the cartoonish way that the mud pillar just juts out makes me smile. I also like the texture on the roof, probably due to my unhealthy fixation on conservation wood atoms. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time when I build the African crested porcupine habitat.